Welcome to the opening bell of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Connor Rogers joining you for a little bit of a hiatus, a holiday hiatus. This podcast coming to you one day later than it normally does as we tell you what mattered most from the holiday slate of NFL games that we saw over the Christmas weekend. But better late than never, I always say. Right, Connor? We're going to get to these takes. We're going to tell you what we saw from the games over the weekend. But first of all, my friend, how was your holidays and how you doing?
It was great, man. A lot of running around, but in a good way. Got to see all the family. The football, there was so much football, and a lot of it was really good. I know it's probably not sustainable throughout a full NFL season, but I really like having games Saturday and Sunday. And I know because of college, and I get it. And obviously, college is a big part of this pod, but the back-to-back days of NFL football, and you know, some people probably would not be a fan of that. Some significant others might not be a fan of that. But it made the holiday that much better that Christmas Eve and Christmas, there was just always games on, dude. It was awesome. And it was really, really good. So how was yours?
Oh, it was great. I was down in Hilton Head, South Carolina with my fiance's family. And I got to say, this winter storm really threw us for a loop there because it was like 20 degrees in this beach town of Hilton Head, South Carolina, and you're looking at all these establishments. Like we went to like restaurants or whatever, and these places are built for summertime at the beach. Like people walk in wearing bathing suits, and like it's just that vibe, and it was just so damn cold, and it was just funny to watch people try to operate in a beach town with cold weather. But I'm sure I really can't complain much because you're up in the Northeast. And I mean, what was the coldest it got to in the Northeast this past weekend?
Oh, I think we hit single digits definitely at some point. And it's one of those things where you're like, we're used to the cold, but I've also not lived upstate for a long time. And that felt like upstate kind of cold where there's really not much you could do to protect that bone chilling on your face. So it gave it a little bit of like, oh, it's the holidays feel. But I was also like, it hasn't felt like this around the holidays here in like 20 years. So it was brutal. And I know some of these games, whether it was, I don't want to say a massive factor, but it definitely was really, really cold and made it hard for some offenses to really get going. And we know how hard that ground probably felt for some of these. So it was interesting to see, there was like 8 games that had to deal with this weather as well.
Well, we can start with one of them if you want to. Falcons-Ravens is the first one that I have on the list here. Ravens end up winning this game 17-9. And you talk about, teams where the elements might affect you a lot. Ravens-Falcons, there is contact every single play. These teams are ground and pound. They're looking for physicality in their identities every step of the way. So Ravens emerge victorious in this game. They go to 10-5 on the season. Really nice record. Still without Lamar Jackson. The Falcons now drop to the very bottom of the NFC South. It is hilarious that a team that was 5-9 before this game was still in the running for a playoff spot. Now, not exactly in the running for a playoff spot. It would take, I think, a miracle for them to get at the top, even if they still have a chance with them. I'm not sure that they do. But anyways, Connor, what was your big takeaway from Ravens Falcons?
Well, I think the Ravens one is kind of simple. The fact that they've been able to run the ball the way they have when Lamar is off the field to kind of grind out wins when they have to have them, right? Obviously, you don't want to lose Lamar and go on this skid, and then you're on the fringe of the playoffs. Instead, Baltimore has done enough to keep their head above water where they're now sitting 10-5, and they're comfortably seated for the playoffs. That was the most important thing for this team during the stretch, and they've been able to accomplish that. And, that's kind of a low-hanging fruit one, but it's just the only way to put it. I mean, Huntley's even banged up. They're not having him throw the ball 20-plus times a game. He had 17 pass attempts in this game. And he was efficient enough, but the real important aspect is that they could run. I look at the Falcons side of this, Trevor, and I think it's a really good sign to see Drake London having success this week with Desmond Ridder. And I'm not saying Desmond Ridder is the future of that franchise. I quite frankly don't believe that, but I think it's the fact that with any kind of capable quarterback that can actually throw the ball, London could be a wide receiver one. And I think we saw him start out really hot to start the year. We know Mariota hit his roller coaster, and London kind of every pass catcher on this team suffered with it. And then you saw a game here where Ridder actually got a chance to throw the ball a lot. and London on 9 targets, 7 catches, 96 yards. I think that's a promising aspect of the Falcons' future, is that we don't know who's going to be under center next year, and even if it is Ritter, but I think the guy they use the top 10 pick on is for real.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, we liked London a lot in the draft process last year. He was my wide receiver 1 for certain points of the season, and I really thought that he was that kind of a player that you can go to in any situation. He could really deliver for you. Unfortunately, he had a fourth down fumble that ended up being very costly in this game. But I think to your point, I think if you look at the whole picture of it start to finish, he's somebody that they consistently relied on. And as they're moving forward, as they are rounding out their pass catching group, he is definitely going to be a cornerstone for him. And you've seen that already so far this season. Did
you agree it was a fumble? I thought it was pretty close. I think they called it on the field as one, though.
As in, did he make a football move?
It was almost like he was catching and transitioning. And I ultimately do think it was a fumble, but I found it to be one of those close ones where basically whatever they say on the field is how it's going to go. And the refs had a tough go of this game, specifically for the Falcons, on a couple different calls. One that was challenged that was absolutely a catch. I didn't think it was the cleanest game for them either.
I thought it was a fumble.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fumble. As much as I love London, I did think that this one was a fumble.
No, absolutely a tough moment for him. But as a whole, I thought he certainly looked the part.
What matters most, and by the way, I did look it up while you were talking, Falcons are officially eliminated from the playoffs. Look, folks, I can't count anything else in the NFC South, all right? Can't count anything out. A team that was 5-9 still was in playoff contention, which is hilarious. But look, my thing that mattered most is Desmond Ridder looked a lot better this week. Now, an interesting part of this is something that we talked about last week and something that we talked about throughout the draft process. Beginning of games, it just feels like Desmond Ridder looks jumpy. It just looks like he's too wound up. And that was, again, the case this week. But he really settled down, I felt like, especially in those second and third quarters, really hitting on specifically those third down passes. He looked really confident. It's not just like the ball was going to where it needed to go. It was the whole setup, man, whether it was play action or he was rolling out or he was going through a progression. He just looked very confident. And there were a handful of times where I was watching some of his passes and I was like, okay, Ridder, like that's not just accuracy. That's not just the ball going to the right receiver. That was ball placement. Like he was leading guys to get yards after the catch. He was floating that ball away from defenders. He was waiting the way that he needed to. He was firing it into throwing windows, which looked great between zone coverage. Shoot, that London catch that was that ended up being a fumble. He had a very tight throwing window between the guy who was covering London and the linebacker who was retreating a little bit. And he didn't pull the trigger because the linebacker moved a certain way. And instead he waited just a second and then instead hit it on the other side of the linebacker, which was just, I thought, a beautiful pause from Ridder.
Really
very
nice throw.
Poised from him. And it was those kinds of throws. And I think that kind of confidence that I was really impressed with. Last week, he had no big-time throws. He had 2 turnover-worthy plays. This time, he had no turnover-worthy plays and 1 big-time throw. The adjusted completion percentage went from 50% last week to 69% this week, so a lot higher, and I think that's kind of what you saw there. Don't know if Desmond Ridder is going to be the future of this team, but he's got 2 more weeks to really show his stuff, and I thought this was a good step in the right direction, and it's important, and I think it does matter most for, of course, what this show is about, because the Falcons are going to get a top 10 pick. Looks like all signs point to that direction, and that means that they're going to be in quarterback conversation. How in they're going to be on that quarterback class depends on how Ridder finishes out the year, but a really good step in the right direction for what could be mattering most for the Falcons' future and for the 2023 NFL Draft.
Yeah, I think most importantly, Trevor, can he play well enough to put himself in a camp battle next year, right? Like, I don't see the Falcons as a team that, going into year 3 with Arthur Smith, that they're going to sit on their hands and they're just going to go in with Ridder and that's that. But can he play well enough where whatever veteran they get, if they draft a guy, whoever it is, Ridder has a shot going into the year? And you're absolutely right. This was a game where he showed significant progress from his first start, made some really, really nice throws, played with more confidence in that second half. And I mean, the London fumble is probably what will be remembered from him in this game, but he went up and made some big catches that it felt like Ridder's like, oh, I trust this guy. Like, I could throw into traffic and this guy's going to make a play on the football.
Next game, let's go. Let's stick in the NFC South. Detroit Lions faced off against the Carolina Panthers. These were 2 of the hotter teams in the what'd you say? What'd you say? Whoa for?
The fact that the Panthers ran for 320 yards.
Okay, all right. Hey, look. Anytime you have any reaction like that, because of what happened with Tom Brady coming out of retirement last year live on our show.
That was live news.
Anytime you have that kind of reaction, I go, what just
That's
happened?
fair. That's fair.
Is Connor looking at the timeline?
I got to save those.
If you guys haven't seen that clip, you got to go back and look at it. Connor literally breaks the news to me live on the podcast while I'm mid-rant that Tom Brady was coming back, and it's one of my favorite moments here. Panthers, though, you were right. Rushed for over 300 yards, and because of so, they got the victory, 37-23 against the Detroit Lions. These were two of the hotter teams in the NFL. Lions had won, I believe, 6 of 7 coming in this game. Panthers had won 3 of 5. So these are two teams that were rolling in the right direction. And I'm not going to lie to you, Connor. I didn't see this, man. I thought the Panthers were going to keep it competitive. I thought it was going to be a one-score game, but I thought the Detroit Lions were going to emerge victorious. But when you looked at the stats, when you looked at the film of this one, what was your what matters most from this game?
I mean, just how the Panthers are kind of playing as a unit right now is really, really impressive to me. That I'm very anti or very pro never hire the interim coach, right? I really do believe in that. I think it's a dangerous game, and it often does not work out. There are a few examples that do, but how do you like Steve Wilkes right now? Seriously, Steve Wilkes right now. How is he not the front runner, or at least a front runner for this job? Because we're going to go through a situation where, you know, Sean Payton's going to be the belle of the ball, right? Like, we know that. We're already hearing it, whether it's because Denver fired Hackett, you know, teams that are going to roll out the red carpet for Sean Payton and all that. But only one team gets Sean Payton, right? Like, that's the thing. There's only one team that gets Sean Payton. And then the rest of this coaching cycle, like many coaching cycles, will have their dart throws that are a disaster. Some guys that end up being pretty good, and then some guys that hang around for a couple of years and just never get over the hump. It's just fascinating to watch what Steve Wilkes is doing with this team, especially from a physicality standpoint. To me, the way they were able to run the ball in this game against a Lions team, a Lions run defense that for about 4 to 5 weeks has been pretty dang good, honestly. And they couldn't stop a nosebleed in this game. It's really that simple. I mean, they just ran at will. They had 2 guys that are not household names in Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, who they you know, Foreman has had a really nice story this year since he took over that job, but both those guys go well over 100 yards. Darnold plays efficient football, 15 to 22, 250 touchdown, no picks. It was simple that Carolina absolutely ran them over in this game. And it just goes back to something that I think we also forgot a little bit because they had started to come together as a unit. The Lions still really do need help on this defense, right? They had such a horrific start to the year. And then for about a month, they did put it together where they were capable, and they have some young talent, whether it's Rodriguez in the middle, Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, all of that. James Houston, of course, has been a nice story, but they still need.
Did James Houston get a sack?
I don't think so.
Oh, no.
Let me double check, though. I don't think he did.
He didn't. He didn't. The streak's over. The streak's over.
Fun fact, the Lions did not have a sack in this game.
No, they did not.
Wow. I think what matters most is that we are at the point where Steve Wilkes is a legitimate guy to keep this job. And then the fact that the Lions, much like a lot of these teams that turn the corner and have had nice seasons, but not great seasons, still have holes in their building process. And that will be addressed. Unfortunately for the Lions, they have an amazing opportunity to kind of just patch that thing up. They're picking 7th overall with the Rams pick. They have the 18th overall pick. They're going to figure that out. They can get involved in free agency, of course, as well. So it's probably a really disappointing loss for Lions fans because the playoff picture starts to fade away as you go to 7 and 8.
Yeah.
But I think at least they know exactly what they need, and the resources are all there for them to solve that.
Lions schedule remaining. They host the Bears this week, and then it's at Packers next week. They went into week 16 versus the Carolina Panthers with a chance to really solidify their playoff odds. If they would have won this game, would have gone above 50% for the Lions to make the playoffs, which would have been pretty incredible. The loss against the Panthers drops that below 20. It's right around 15, 16% now for the Lions to make the playoffs. They're just probably going to be on the outside looking in after an incredible run here that we've seen in the second half of the season. And I do think that what matters most in this one, I've talked plenty, and you obviously talked there about Steve Wilks. I think that's a big thing that matters. And you look at how well they're running the ball, how well they're playing on defense, how well that offensive line is being able to bounce back. Those are the things that you really look for. The skill positions, the quarterback, the play calling, the points, those will come once you really solidify the next staff and get some extra juice, some new faces in those areas. But when you're talking about an interim turn and guys around in the middle of the season, that's really what you will look for, and that they've done a great job. But back to the Lions, I think what matters most here is that it feels like you've just got to have almost a clean sweep of the coaches on the defensive side of the ball. And I hate saying that because I like Aaron Glenn. I like Todd Wash. I like Kelvin Shepard. Like I like a lot of these guys that they have on the defensive staff. They just haven't been able to produce.
Yeah.
Do they have the horses to do that? I think a lot of those coaches, if you're sitting at a table, just between you and them sharing a beer, they'd probably tell you, hey, what are we supposed to do with this defensive group? This is a group that you mentioned. It still needs top tier defensive talent. Jeff Okudah got absolutely smoked this past week, right? He's had a couple of nice performances through the second half of this season through a bounce back year after a torn Achilles, but he has not been that number 3 overall pick type of a corner for you. The things that you like, but he got benched this past week because of how unreliable he is. The secondary group overall needs a ton of work. The defensive line still needs a ton of work. I think the coaches would tell you that they don't have the players yet, but it'd be hard to go into next year just saying, yeah, we're going to roll with the same staff. I think that you're going to see a lot of changes on the defensive staff there with the Lions. I think a lot of their top draft picks over this next draft season's got to be on the defensive side of the ball. You got to figure it out on the defensive side of the ball because Jared Goff, I'll give him his props. Jared Goff played well again this past week. Played really well. You give that guy a competent defense this week, Lions probably win that game, right? Ain't nothing that the Panthers were really doing that was too dynamic. They were just whooping some ass up front. That's what they were doing. And if you give them a better defense, I think Jared Goff again comes away with the W. So we're going to talk plenty about quarterbacks from Detroit, and we're still going to be able to have that conversation. But ultimately, Goff's been playing well. He played well again this weekend. But the defense, it was the reason why the beginning of the season they fell into the hole, and ultimately it's the reason why it feels like their Cinderella story struck midnight in Carolina this past week. So I think we're seeing still wholesale changes from the Lions defensive staff.
And Sam Darnold gets to go into free agency with a little momentum.
A lot more leverage than we thought he was going to have.
From, he started the last 4 games for them. He's thrown 1 touchdown in all 4 of those games. He has not thrown an interception, which has always been his biggest problem. He's sprinkled in 2 rushing touchdowns. I mean, when you're a 25-year-old quarterback that shows some signs of life, somebody will give you a chance. And Sam is going to get that chance in a free agency that is going to be really, really interesting on the veteran quarterback market.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, the Jets are looking for... Sorry.
Stop.
Sorry. We'll go on. We'll go on to the next game. Bills Bears. This game in Chicago. Bills come away big in this one. 35-13, the final score. Speaking of good ground games, man, Bills really poured it on the Chicago Bears. And that was supposed to be their thing, right? Feels like Chicago was on the other side saying, whoa, that's our bread and butter. And it absolutely wasn't against the Bills. But Bills get another win, but it didn't feel like just another win in this aspect. It felt like a statement win. It felt like a momentum win. But Connor, what matters most here from this one?
That the Bills, I don't ever want to say provided a blueprint, but did show that you could stop Justin Fields on the ground and force the Bears to play a different way, because that is something that maybe that doesn't matter as much right now as the Bears continue to lose, but might matter a lot in the future, is the fact of, when Fields was efficient as a passer in this game, he was 15 of 23. He only threw for 119 yards, but he didn't throw a pick. He did get banged up again, which is becoming a theme. It's a pretty tough way when you're getting hit that much as a quarterback. You're going to get banged up here and there. But the Bills completely eliminated the ground game from Justin Fields. And that's a lot easier said than done. But I thought they contained the edges really well. I thought they tackled really well, which has been a huge problem in stopping Fields on the ground. He's broken a ton of tackles. His scrambling and designed running has been a huge aspect this year. But the Bills have shown you a little bit of a blueprint of how to do it, and they countered with their own ground game in a really, really, really cold game. And when you look at it, Trevor, what they did for a majority of the game, they played quarters and cover three. They
Mm-hmm.
flooded the field with DBs that were really smart in their assignments, and that's what the Bills do. The Bills are traditionally not this man-to-man team where your backs are going to get turned and then Fields can run upfield and destroy you. They treat a lot of quarterbacks that way, not just Justin Fields. But I just found it interesting when diving into the database that, they had 59 defensive snaps for, let's do a little math here, almost 40 of them, just about 40 of those 59, they sat in cover three or quarters, and they tackled. And that's how the Bills, they tackled well. And that's really the bread and butter of the Bills schematically, defensively. But it was interesting to see how effective that was against a guy that could beat you on any single play.
Yeah, Justin Fields is talented enough to where he could just be a scheme buster, right? You could do a lot of great things correct, and he could still make you pay for it. But it just felt like the Bills played such great disciplined defense. Well, whether it was defending zone reads or, when Justin Fields was getting to the outside, Matt Milano coming up and making a big tackle in space, whatever it was, that feels like it's not like it's a brand new blueprint, but it's almost like that the Bills almost. I'll kind of flip that around a little bit, and I'll almost say that the Bills showed the rest of the NFL, this is how good our defense can be. Everybody talks about Josh Allen and a lot of the passing weapons and how many points they can put up, all that stuff. But this is how good this defense can really be when they really stick to the script, when they continue to play very sound, disciplined football. And that's my big takeaway. What matters most for this game. And this is kind of, I'm calling myself out here, right? Over the last couple of weeks, on our show that we do at PFF's YouTube, It's Just Football, Mike and I have this bracketology thing that we do on Fridays. And over the last couple of weeks, we have predicted, we're like, Kansas City Chiefs, they're probably going to be the 1 seed. They got an easy schedule. We're always good. We have put the Chiefs at the number 1 seed every single time. And I have consistently put the Buffalo Bills, not even as the 2 seed. I've put them as a 3 seed because I think I was saying that they were going to lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, that the Chiefs were going to run the table. They were going to take the 1, Bills were going to take the 3. Connor, Bills have the 1 seed right now. Bills control their own destiny. Yep. Massive game in Cincinnati coming up this week. But if they defeat the Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to be the 1 seed. I don't really think that the Patriots are going to upset them in the last game of the season. I think they're going to take over the 1 seed, and the playoffs running through Buffalo is huge. I have not given enough thought or credit to what that picture is like because I didn't think it was going to happen. I was just like, Chiefs schedule's too easy. Nah, Bills are kind of a little bit more high variance than I thought they were going to be. They're peaking at the right time. The run game was fantastic, over 200 yards rushing combined between Devin Singletary and James Cook this past week, which was key, right? A great rushing attack from the Bills that didn't have to be led by Josh Allen. And that's when I get a little bit worried about the Bills offense, is how Josh Allen centric they can be. Give him a little bit of help with the ground game. I think that's going to pay dividends as we get into the playoffs here. Bills control their own destiny. And the thing that to me is what matters most. They're playing great football. They're playing disciplined football on the defensive side of things, and they're figuring it out on the ground game to really complement what Josh Allen could do. So it's not a one-man show anymore. The defense isn't kind of all over the place. They're coming together at the right time, and this Bills team is absolutely dangerous. And if you thought of them as a potential Super Bowl team at the beginning of the year, you got to be happy with where they are right now as another potential Super Bowl team with a couple weeks ago.
Really well said. And I'll raise my hand and telling myself there too. I thought the Chiefs and the Bengals were just playing in a different tier than them recently. And it feels like ever since I said that, the Bills have figured it out almost all the way across the board. We know Allen's been dealing with the UCL. He hasn't been the same since then, but Josh Allen is still really, really good and makes these plays that just not a lot of guys can. But you're right, Trevor. The ground game to supplement him, the defense that only gave up 3 points in the second half. I mean, they're a really, really scary team that has a lot to play for. I know a lot of people are like, oh, what if they rest their starters against New England and New England can get in at the end? Yeah, the Bills beat the Chiefs this year, but the Bills are playing for that 1 seed, I think, until the end here. And also, I don't think they want to take their foot off the gas. They have a good thing going right now. So really, really strong stuff from the Bills. You want to quickly move to Saints-Browns because I know I
don't have a big take on this one.
I have one. And
Saints,
it's not a big take.
Saints, and I'll get to that. I'll kind of give you the floor with it. But Saints won this game 17-10. Both these teams now 6-9 on the season. And even though the Saints aren't technically eliminated from the playoffs, they still only have a 4% chance to make the playoffs, 3% chance to win that division. And it doesn't feel like something that would happen. It would truly take a miracle. So I just didn't really get a lot from this game. It kind of was just like a game that happened. And it felt like the weather, you mentioned at the top of the podcast that weather affected some of these games. It felt like the bitter cold in Cleveland, Ohio, was just imposing its will on both of these teams, and no one was really going to explode one way or the other. And it was a close game till the end, I think, for that reason. But what matters most from this one? I'm curious to hear it.
I know the cold was a factor. I know. I get it. When is the $250 million quarterback going to actually look good?
It wasn't going to be this year. It wasn't going to be this year.
We've had 4 games from Deshaun Watson this year. Also a horrible summer, by the way, where he looked terrible. I know he's shaking off rust. 12 for 22 with 131 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick against Houston. 26 of 42 for 276, a touchdown interception against the Bengals, where they lost 23-10. 18 for 28 for 161 yards and a touchdown against Baltimore, who injuries all over that secondary. They haven't been the same, but they won the game, the Browns. 15 of 31, 135 yards, no touchdowns and a pick against the Saints. Hasn't rushed for more than 33 yards in any game. I'm not judging Deshaun Watson on a standard of, like, is that okay? Is that average? Is that mediocre? You are paid $250 million guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
You are expected to be a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. You don't look like a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. I'm not saying it's panic time because there's going to be rust. He didn't play for a while. This is with a team that has a lot going on. But if next year starts like this, it's going to be very interesting to see how we talk about this contract and that trade.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're told. Obviously, there's already a ton of reason why we have talked about this contract and this trade, about how the absurdity of really how we got to this point with Deshaun Watson being a $250 million quarterback on the Cleveland Browns. But that pressure is only going to mount more and more. I never really expected much from Deshaun Watson this year, even when he came back. I'm with you. I felt like the rust, everything that he has dealt with and had to hear, deservingly so, getting to Cleveland, I figured that it was just going to be something that really brought down this team. And you know what? That is part of the decision that they made to bring Deshaun Watson, and now they are eating it. So we'll see what happens with the Cleveland Browns going into the offseason, what these last 2 games are going to bring, because you're right. There's no doubt about it. Deshaun has been bad. Seahawks at Kansas City Chiefs. Seahawks lose this one 24-10. Another good win for the Chiefs, as they, like the Buffalo Bills, looked like they're firing on all cylinders for this one. Chiefs advanced to 12-3 on the season. Seahawks now drop to 7-8. I'll start with this one.
Okay.
I really like what I've seen from the Chiefs' run defense. Like, I feel like we talk a lot about so many other aspects of the Chiefs game, right? We talk about Chris Jones in the pass rush. We talk about, on the other side of the ball, the interior offensive line, the run game that they have with Isaiah Pacheco, the weapons, how Patrick Mahomes obviously is having an MVP type of campaign. But I feel like how they were this past week at defending the run against the Seahawks again shows, like it does for the Buffalo Bills, how complete of a defense this is becoming at the right time. This is from Nate Christensen on Twitter. He tweeted this out. Seattle's first down runs versus the Kansas City Chiefs, 12 carries, 38 yards. Like, this is just like they were locking them down on the early downs. And Christensen also wrote about this. He said that Steve Spagnuolo, their defensive coordinator, saying, you have to earn the right to rush the passer. That is a Spags quote. You have to do the work on first and second downs in order to get that opportunity to really get after the passer on third down. And I feel like we've always highlighted what the Chiefs do on third down because they have some nice pass rushers, including Chris Jones, who's, of course, having an unbelievable season. But the run defense, man, they had 7 players that had a run defense grade over 70 this past week. That is a lot. That is significant. That means that your boys came to play. That means that they were disciplined. That means they were ready. That means that they were as excited about making plays and decisions on first and second down just as much as they were when they got into the third and longs. That is a dangerous defense. That is something that when we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, when we talk about how dangerous they are, we never really talk about run defense, right? When's the last time you talked about the Kansas City Chiefs and talked about run defense? Guess what you need to be a complete team to win a Super Bowl? You need run defense in some way, shape, or form. Do you have to be as good as the San Francisco 49ers have been? No, you don't have to be number one, but you got to be damn good. And it feels like the Chiefs are getting to the point where that area of their team is just as formidable as some of the other areas that we praise week in and week out. So wanted to say what matters most is that, yes, another Chiefs win. Yes, we could talk about Patrick Mahomes. We could talk about how great of a game Travis Kelce had, all that stuff. But I wanted to highlight an area of the game where we don't talk about it a lot that could mean all the difference in the world once we get into the playoffs and how well that defense is playing.
I'm, number one, fully agree, and I'm really happy you took the Chiefs side because I have a Seahawks take for this one.
Wonderful.
A team, obviously, that's fighting for their life for the playoffs, and they will meet their similar foe in the New York Jets this weekend as both teams sit there fighting for their playoff lives. Trevor, I didn't realize, what matters most to me is, at least I didn't realize how vital Tyler Lockett is to this offense. I've known Tyler Lockett's a really good player.
Huge.
We've had our laughs on the contract, but Tyler Lockett's a really, really good player. I didn't realize it was like this. Get this, right? So Lockett had surgery on a fractured finger, missed this game. Seattle was 2 of 14 on third down this against the Chiefs.
Yikes.
Lockett leads the team this year, counting that game. Still leads the team on first down receptions this year with 47. I think almost 20 of them have come on third or fourth down. It's a massive loss. It's a massive, massive loss for Geno Smith, for DK Metcalf, for the run game with how he could take the top off of the defense. That was it to me. Is what matters most is Tyler Lockett means so much to this entire unit, all the way down from Geno to the run game to Metcalf, and overall the outcome of the game and Seattle's lack of ability to score points.
It felt like Geno was pressing to DK Metcalf this game without Tyler Lockett, and understandably so. He just didn't feel as comfortable with the other weapons. But you're right. I mean, that's certainly something to point out. Seattle Seahawks just a 23% chance to make the playoffs now, sitting there at 7-8. New York Giants, Minnesota Vikings. Thriller. Took a 61-yard field goal for the Vikings to win this game, but they move on to 8-1 at home in 2022. An impressive record. They still stay within striking distance of that potential number one overall seed. They win this one 27-24 against the Giants. Connor, what matters most from this one?
That they really let Daniel Jones down in this game. They really, really did
play well in this one.
I'm going to pull up the drops here in just a second for the Giants, but Jones, obviously, in this game, Jones has not been consistently asked to throw the ball down the field throughout the season. He hasn't been asked to do a ton with his arm. This was a game where he surpassed over 40 dropbacks. He threw for 340 yards. Yes, he threw the pick. I get it. Yes, he held onto the ball and was sacked 3 times. And, I know he fumbled on one of them. I think they recovered that one. That's still a little bit of an issue. But man, Trevor, Richie James led the team in targets. Richie James had 12 targets. Isaiah Hodgins, who they got off the scrap heap, had 11 targets. I mean, he's throwing to nobody out there. And I just find the Giants situation so fascinating in a sense of what do they do this offseason? I think what makes sense for both parties, unless Jones can get more money, and good for him, is finding that bridge deal that gives Jones security beyond this year, because he's going to get that from someone. There's no way in this world Daniel Jones is stuck playing on a 1-year prove-it deal next year. He's going to get guaranteed money into 2024.
Yeah.
And the Giants are probably going to have to be the team that gives it to him. But you just look at this one. So they had 3 drops. Richie James had 2 of them. Bellinger had the fumble. I know he had his own struggles, but Daniel Jones was just not the problem in this game. And I think what matters most is just that if I was voting coach of the year right now, I would vote for Brian Daboll. I really would. And I understand why Sirianni has been a front runner. I understand, although it's going to be a lot tougher now, why McDaniel was in that picture.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Carroll. I get all of it. I really do. But if I had a vote, I will just publicly say right now, my vote would go to Brian Daboll. In a game they lost on a 61-yard field goal to the Vikings. Truthfully, on the road, talent-wise, Giants had no business even being in this game. And it came down to a 61-yard field goal.
It's hard to argue any type of Brian Daboll Coach of the Year case.
Yeah, him or Doug, because of what Doug had to clean up with Urban Meyer.
Yeah.
But still, that Jacksonville is still a significantly, probably more talented team than the Giants. Think about how much money they spent.
No, I do agree with you. But having Lawrence versus having Daniel Jones obviously goes a lot into it. But like I do see what you're saying. Those guys are certainly up there. I'm not here to debate just like little details of it. We're giving shout outs to guys.
Doug is worthy, no doubt. I'll throw my hands up there.
What matters most is actually for the Vikings, but I do want to touch on the Giants. They're in an interesting spot going into this offseason because for as good as this team looks and as much as you are saying like Brian Daboll is Coach of the Year, I think that's the part that people need to remember about all this. Like, yes, Daniel Jones looks better, but I think Daniel Jones looks better just because of Brian Daboll.
I agree.
What would Brian Daboll have if he had a more talented quarterback? I'm not a big Daniel Jones believer, and I've gotten tweets, I've gotten messages from Giants fans who are like, "When are you going to give Daniel Jones his props?" Daniel Jones had a great game this past week. He was absolutely not the problem. In fact, he was a solution in a lot of ways. This feels like his best year. But is this his ceiling? Right? That's the tricky part with the New York Giants because this offseason, they have Daniel Jones as an unrestricted free agent, Saquon Barkley as an unrestricted free agent, Darius Slayton, offensive linemen, other defensive players. Like they have the chance to really reset a lot of what their offensive identity is right now. If you think that you could get a ton out of Daniel Jones, like that's fine. I don't necessarily think that. I feel like we're seeing the best of Daniel Jones right now. And am I going to want to invest fully into the best version of a player being a fringe playoff team? Probably not. So that's kind of what that's where I am with Daniel Jones. I've gotten a bunch of messages about Daniel Jones, and this is kind of a therapeutic moment for me because I haven't exactly like addressed it with the people who are tweeting at me, but I'm not the biggest Daniel Jones believer. I'm not.
I mean, I'm not either.
And that's the thing. Brian Daboll means more to what you are seeing out there right now. Means more to the 8-6-1 record that the Giants are. Means more to the competitive nature of being a one-score game down to the wire against a Vikings team that's 12-3 or whatever they are. Brian Daboll matters the most, not Daniel Jones.
Coach of the Year, Brian Daboll.
You can take Daniel Jones off of this team and get a different quarterback on there and have a higher ceiling. If they have the opportunity to do that, do it. That's my Giants rant about all that. I didn't even think that I was going to go into that rant, but that's kind of, maybe that was out of place. I don't know, but whatever. No. Anyways, what matters most is about the Minnesota Vikings. This is a super close game between the two teams in the NFL that have the most one-score games this season. Vikings, I said it already. They're 8-1 at home. They have a shot at the 1 seed. If they get the 1 seed, I think they're an incredibly dangerous team. If you take the incredible collapse that they had at the beginning of last week's game against the Colts, factor in the fact that they were able to bounce back mid-game and have the greatest comeback in NFL history. Then you pair that with this game, which is a back-and-forth battle. They were down on the scoreboard once again. They had their backs against the wall. They were able to orchestrate key scoring drives. This feels like a complete team in Minnesota. Now, that's not to say that they're a perfect team. Those words are different. A complete team, to me, simply means that week in and week out, sometimes the offense is going to fall a little bit short. Can the defense pick them up? Do they have that ability? Did they have that execution? Did they have that whatever? Same thing for offense. Sometimes the defense is going to fall short. sometimes the defense is going to allow a lot more yards, a lot more points than they normally do. Can the offense then pick them up on the other side of the ball? Can you still get wins even when one side of the ball falters? I think the Minnesota Vikings have the DNA to show that they can do that. To me, that's a complete football team. Not a perfect football team. These are different words. But I think the Vikings have what Kevin O'Connell has done with this team is turned them into a complete football team. So that's what matters most. Is the Vikings aren't just this team that you can write off, especially if they're going to be at home this postseason.
Listen, I like it. I mean, we were high on what we saw from the Vikings earlier in the year. We know everybody throughout the stats that said, hey, they actually stink. And I think that was a bit of an overreaction. I think the numbers told you they were not as good as their record indicates, but that doesn't mean they're a bad football team. And you're right, Trevor. I mean, it was kind of interesting to see. We didn't know when the new regime came in, would they be out on Kirk Cousins, right? And they slapped on another year to his deal. And that looks like a really good move right now. Like, imagine if we were talking about Kirk Cousins entering free agency this year. I know he'll be 35 next year, but the Vikings have him on a $36.2 million cap hit. There's void money in 2024 to kind of cover some of the contract as a whole. But for Cousins' limitations, Cousins would be walking into free agency and get the bag from somebody. Or the Vikings. He'd have more leverage with the Vikings again. So you got to give him credit for some savvy moves of having this regime walked in and they acquired a good football team, right? That's what the Vikings were. I think they were a desirable place to go because they have the best wide receiver in football. They have pieces everywhere. They really do. But they have made some savvy tweaks all the way down to getting the coaching hire right that has led to this level of success, and they deserve credit for that.
Bengals Patriots. Do you have a take on this game? Bengals advanced to 11-4 on the season, 22-18. This game really didn't feel that close. The Bengals were up 22-0 at half.
Bizarre game.
Patriots score 18, kind of an improbable fashion, a little bit there, getting those 18 points at the end. Patriots dropped to 7-8. You have a take for this one? I really don't have a take. I feel like I've said all I needed to say about the Patriots. The defense is good.
You want my take?
Sure. Yeah, give it to me. Yeah.
Mac Jones is my least favorite player in the entire NFL. That's my take. And I don't know how anybody that is not a Patriots fan doesn't have the same take. I know it's harsh, and we don't do that a lot on this podcast. Man, it's insufferable. It's insufferable. The whining to the refs, the yelling at your coaches, the trying to take out a opposing player's legs. It's enough. Enough. I don't even really believe Patriots fans deep down like this guy. I really don't. That's my take. And he also missed I think it was Myers. The 4th and 15, the Bengals are playing 10 yards off, and the receiver ran right by the corner, and he short-armed the throw is short. It would have been a miracle play, but the player did have a step. But that's my honest take, Trevor. I know it's not a clean one, but
I should know.
I know Twitter, there's a lot of hyperbole with clips of like, this guy is an asshole. But like that clip of him diving at someone's legs, we have now a full reel of Mac Jones things like that. It's not a good reputation to have in the NFL.
The reason why I don't really have a take about this is because we've obviously already talked about a lot of these things with the Patriots. Defense, good. Matt Patricia, bad. Pass catchers, bad. Mac Jones, bad. Like how many? I don't. This is the story of the Patriots season. They don't deserve to be a playoff team. They shouldn't be a playoff team. I hope they're not a playoff team because I don't really want to see them in the postseason. I don't know if they get eliminated. Did they get eliminated? I didn't think they did.
No, they're not eliminated. If they win out, obviously things change for them.
They got a 20% chance. But they have the second toughest schedule.
They play the Dolphins, who will be without Tua, but then they play the Bills.
Dolphins and the Bills. Yeah, it's tough.
My one real Patriots thing is I am fascinated to see their offseason because they're going to have a boatload of money, and massive question marks starting at the offensive staff going all the way down to the quarterback. And I'm fascinated to see how Belichick handles it.
Bengals also feel like we've said this a couple of weeks in a row, but feel like a team that's peaking at the right time. It was just another good game for the Bengals. They were on the road. It was hella cold. Trent Irwin's the GOAT. T. Higgins, another 100-yard game. That's. I mean, we've touched on this a little bit, but that feels like the what's matters most, right? Jamar Chase, 8 catches, 79 yards, no touchdowns. Okay, it's not, obviously it's still a good game. He got 79 yards, but it wasn't like this takeover Jamar Chase performance. Everybody else picked up. Joe Mixon, 16 carries, 65 yards, over 4.1 yards per carry average. T. Higgins, 8 catches, 128 yards and a touchdown. Trent Irwin, I kind of joked about it there, but 3 catches, 45 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, the Bengals had become a team where last year it felt like it was this Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase connection that was going to lead them to the promised land. Now it is a Bengals offense kind of a thing. It is a complete Bengals offense kind of a thing. Jamar Chase is there if he's going to go off, if he's going to be a superstar. But if he's not, if the other team can figure out how to allocate resources to really lock him down and really focus in on him, they can go elsewhere. And Joe Burrow is clearly not afraid to go elsewhere. And that makes the Bengals a very dangerous team. I cannot wait for Bengals Bills this upcoming week. It's going to be massive.
It's going to be awesome.
Texans.
All right, Texans, I would say, I feel like we're getting down to the wire for the Saturday.
We got Texans, Titans. Texans come away with the massive dub, 19-14. Titans drop their 5th in a row, go to 7-8 on the season. Texans do still have the number 1 overall pick, but now it's getting a little squirrely.
Squirrely is such an underutilized word.
Let's get a little squirrely. Only 1 game ahead. In fact, I think it's just a half game ahead, right? Because it's the tie. With the Chicago Bears.
I have a take a Rooski on this one.
Okay, what? All right, fire it up. What do we got?
I think the Texans are going to be picking 2nd overall.
No. What's their schedule?
They end the season with Nick Foles. Nick Foles against that secondary? Bro, they're gonna win. They're gonna squeak out a win. They're gonna be 3-12-1, and the Bears are gonna be.
They play the Jags.
I mean, 3.
You realize the Jags are their only other win,
which is hilarious.
But it's a new Jags team, baby.
But what?
New horizons.
I'm just saying. I think the Texans are gonna be picking 2nd overall.
No,
I don't think the Bears beat the Lions or the Vikings, barring resting players, which shouldn't be happening.
No, I don't think you're going to get that in either situation. Oh, no. Okay, hold on. We can't give away the Wednesday show. No,
I snuck it in there. There's your movie trailer.
Watch the Wednesday show. We're going to dive very deep into that. Connor, I don't really know what to do with the Tennessee Titans.
I don't think the Titans know what to do with the Tennessee Titans.
That's what matters most. You fired John Robinson a couple weeks ago. And you did so under the umbrella of we hold our organization to a higher standard. I assume that Mike Vrabel is now going to have basically autonomous control over the roster, and he's just going to consult with the owners. I know they're going to hire a GM, obviously, but Mike Vrabel is now going to be in on those conversations of who's going to come in and be the GM. So that's always a little bit strange of a dynamic, just because the pyramid of NFL teams is often that the general manager is a step below the owner and a step above the head coach. And when you kind of flip that around, it gets a little bit interesting, especially since the Titans are on a 5-game losing streak, and they're probably going to end the year on a 7-game losing streak. This is a team that had the number 1 overall seed last year in the AFC. And they're about to end the year 7-10 on a 7-game losing streak because they play the Dallas Cowboys next week, and then they play the Jacksonville Jaguars the week after that. Maybe the Jags rest their starters because they can clinch the South. I don't know exactly what the mathematical scenario is for that there, but it's ugly, man.
Yeah.
Tannehill is going to be 35 years old next season. You can save $18 million on the cap if you cut him. They don't have a ton of free agents. I think Nate Davis, David Long Jr., DeMarcus Walker, those are the 3 ones that I noted when I was looking at the list. Wide receiver core is terrible, even if you factor in Treylon Burks. I just don't really know what to make of this team. Like, we knew the Tennessee Titans overachieved last year. Everyone knew that.
Yeah, but they were the hot decline team.
This is catastrophic, man. This is absolute failure. And
They've been decimated.
For you to have already fired your GM, man, it just shows that, like, I feel like we're at dark times are about to happen with the Tennessee Titans. That's where I am with them.
Well, the thing is, they have a coach that should have as much job security as anybody, right? Like, Mike Vrabel can't go anywhere.
Right.
But then it raises the question, Trevor, of, I mean, the entire fan base wants Todd Downing fired 3 weeks ago. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying what's going on. They fired the GM at a time where that does not happen. Like, didn't even make it to the end of the year. They're at a total crossroads at quarterback. Like you said, do they go into next year with Tannehill? The way they treat Malik Willis tells you they have no confidence in Malik Willis at this moment.
Doesn't feel like it.
Which is, I mean, we knew Malik needed a redshirt year. No real analyst was saying Malik Willis is getting drafted and he's your savior from week 1 of his rookie season.
Right.
No one said that. So I'm with you. It's scary. It's scary if you're the Titans. It really is, because realistically, you're picking highest at what? 9th? The highest you could pick is 9th?
They might be able to pick like 8th, but it's going to be somewhere around there.
They're tricky. Could
pick in the top 10, but
it's tough.
All right. 49ers. Let's move on to the 49ers game. 49ers 37, Washington Commanders 20. Another dominant performance for the 49ers. What do you got for this one, Connor?
Well, this isn't the most important aspect of their team right now, but it's one that I find personally very interesting as we approach the Niners this offseason. And they're awesome. I mean, they are absolutely every bit of a Super Bowl threat. I really think, Trevor, we're heading towards a summer where I'll comfortably say it's going to be Trey Lance versus Brock Purdy for that job. Like, I think for so long we're like, man, how are they going to bring Jimmy back next year? Jimmy's going to walk into free agency. He's going to get a nice 3-year deal somewhere for a lot of money. And the Niners don't have to be the ones that pay it anymore. I really think that this staff likes Brock Purdy a lot. It's not just a fun little story anymore of the Mr. Irrelevant. He absolutely has limitations right now. I'm not saying he can't grow out of them. This is a offense that is tailor-made to help a rookie quarterback. And that's one of the beautiful things about Kyle Shanahan's ability in this league. But we've now seen enough where I really think we're headed towards Purdy and Trey Lance next summer. And that money that would usually be allocated at veteran quarterback can take care of other areas they need to take care of.
I don't disagree, man.
That matters a lot.
I don't disagree. I mean, I'll touch on Washington really quick with their playoff chances. They just have a 33% chance to make the playoffs now after this loss to the 49ers. But really, what matters most has to be about the Niners. Then I'll say it. Niners are the scariest team in the NFC. I think right now they're scarier than the Eagles, certainly with the injuries that we have and
Lane Johnson,
how up in the air it is with Lane Johnson, obviously, who's going to miss the rest of the regular season. Jalen Hurts, who's sidelined for a little bit. And if he comes back, how close to 100% is he really going to be? I don't know. Vikings obviously are a good football team, but Vikings are 49ers. You got, your mortgage is on the line. Who you betting on? You're going to be betting on the 49ers. You are. And they are the scariest team in the NFC right now. I think that if I had to bet on a team to make the Super Bowl from this conference right now, I'd be betting on the San Francisco 49ers. Connor, they have their margin of victory over the last 5 games, which has been 5 wins, has been 16.5. That's their average margin of victory. A couple of those games were with Jimmy Garoppolo. The rest of them were with Brock Purdy, and a couple of them have been without Deebo Samuel. They've been Deebo for all of this.
Well, and Kittle is completely unlocked since Purdy's taken over.
And Purdy's been a guy who, even going back to Iowa State, loved to throw the ball to tight ends. He's in a perfect spot for it. It's this to me is they are the team. And I do not mean this as an insult to the Eagles and the season that they have had, but we've talked about it on this show and a lot of people talk about it. It is the status of your team going into the playoffs that matters the most. And as of right now, the team that I would not want to play the most in the NFC is, I have no reservations about it, the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
That is the team that I do not want to play at all. Home, away, prime time, non-prime time, Sunday, Saturday, Monday, Thursday. I don't care. I don't want to play the 49ers. They're the best team in that conference right now. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, it's a war of attrition, and Kyle Shanahan is every year a top 5 coach in the NFL. And there are stretches where he's the best coach in the NFL. And honestly, right now, and once again, I can't emphasize this enough, and I know I do run this back maybe a little too much. Part of your success as a head coach, a huge part, is who you hire. Kyle Shanahan has now hired and maybe helped develop Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel, and in my opinion, the hottest first-time head coach candidate next year, DeMeco Ryans.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, getting that level of human to come work for you and thrive in your working environment to the point where they are taken to run a different organization speaks to how successful you are as a whole. So they're terrifying. They're terrifying.
Cowboys and Eagles. We can go on to the Eagles next. Eagles dropped one. Finally, it feels like, to the Dallas Cowboys by a score of 40-34. Big time shootout. Obviously, Jalen Hurts not starting in this game. Gardner Minshew started, goes 24 for 40, 355 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The big storyline, though, I think from this one is losing their right tackle, Lane Johnson, who's going to miss the rest of the regular season, at least with a torn tendon in his abdominal muscle, which sounds extremely painful. Would not recommend. Haven't even experienced it myself and would not recommend. They are hopeful they get him back for the playoffs, especially if the Eagles are getting that extra week of rest. That would be huge now, not only for Jalen Hurts' shoulder, he's coming through a sprained shoulder, but also for Lane Johnson clearly as well. So the number 1 seed means a lot to Philly. And what matters most is that from what I saw from Gardner Minshew this past week, I think they're locking up the 1 seed. Eagles win one more game, and they lock up the 1 seed in the NFC. They've got the Saints, and they've got the Giants. Even without Jalen Hurts for both of those games, I think this is still a good enough team to where they win one of them. So I think that this is going to be the number 1 seed when it's all said and done. So that to me was what matters most, because it means a lot towards the playoff seeding, where we're going to be and how much rest that kind of beat up Eagles team can be. I still have faith in them to get that 1 seed with how well I felt like Gardner Minshew played.
Well, I'm with you. I'm fascinated if you and I were sitting here doing a free agent quarterback rankings today where Gardner Minshew would stack up. Because I think you could sit here and make the case he should be number 1. And he won't be paid like that. He won't be treated like that.
Well, Lamar Jackson.
Tagged.
Okay, all right. I just want to say.
No. You saved me from the YouTube comments. You saved me from the YouTube comments, and that is one of many things I appreciate about you. Lamar, far and away, he's going to be tagged. Out of guys that won't be tagged, you're going to have, right, like Jimmy G, Gardner Minshew, Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, I think Huntley, unless he's restricted, Sam Darnold.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you had to bet on one, aren't you the most intrigued by Gardner Minshew?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what Gardner Minshew's ceiling really is, but I think his floor is pretty high. I mean, his floor is pretty high, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting to me. What matters most, though, from this game was on the Cowboys side.
Nice.
Dak Prescott reminded everybody that he can go out and win you a game against the big dogs, right? I mean, I don't know. I guess because he's the quarterback of the Cowboys. Dak is one of the most scrutinized players in the entire NFL. And sure, has he made some mistakes this year, in tough situations? Every quarterback has. This was a game where I'm watching the fourth quarter, Trevor, and Dak was getting it done. The big 3rd and 10 throw down the sideline, the ability to evade pressure. I think Dak is just really, really good, and I don't know how we always get away from that every time. People are like, hey, he's not really like a top 10 guy, or, how can you trust him, or he's overrated. This was a game to me that the Cowboys really needed out of Dak, because you go into the playoffs and you look at him and you go, yeah, if we're in a shootout with the Eagles or whoever, we can put it on Dak's shoulders. Tony Pollard got banged up in this game. Tony Pollard did not have a typical Pollard kind of game. I was not blown away because this is what I expect from Dak, but it's just a reminder that against the elite quarterbacks, and he wasn't against one in this game with Gardner, but the Eagles' offense is elite. He can get it done. And the Cowboys need that going into the postseason.
Look, the team they were going up against scored 34 points. They needed more than 34 points. Anytime that you can, anytime that's the bar that you have to hit and you hit it, that's a job well done. No doubt about it. This is a pro Dak podcast. Dak's ability and his ceiling as a quarterback is very, very high. I think the worry has been over the last couple of weeks, the turnovers. But you see, when Dak can keep the turnovers down, obviously, how potent this offense could be. Shout out to CeeDee Lamb as well, who had another fantastic game, truly budding into one of the best young wide receivers in the game, no doubt about it. But huge win for the Cowboys. And I'll say this too, I'll put my hand up on this one. I didn't think the Cowboys were going to be that good this year. Certainly with them sitting here at 11-4, having a real shot to be, I guess technically they are still in the hunt, right, for the division title. I just never thought that was going to be the case with the Cowboys. I thought they were going to regress a little bit. Not the biggest believer in Mike McCarthy, but hats off to him. That whole unit is playing really well, and they're going to go into the playoffs, it feels like, as a really strong team. So shout out to the Cowboys there. Raiders-Steelers next. Steelers 13, Raiders 10. Another collapse from the Las Vegas Raiders, although this one not as high scoring. Connor, for this one, for my What Matters Most, I wanted to read off a couple of quotes for you.
Good. I think we have the same one.
Okay. Josh Jacobs quote?
Yep. That's what mattered most to me in this game. I'm so glad you have him ready to roll.
Okay. Josh Jacobs quote after this game. I'm tired of dealing with this expletive. Tired of dealing with it. Like every day I come here and bust my ass, I see these guys busting their ass and the result is not there. And for me, the last 4 years, the result hasn't been there. Quite frankly, I don't know what else to do. Now, I will also read the quote from Josh McDaniels after the game. And the quote from Josh Jacobs was obviously coming from a lot of frustration of them not being able to get the ball or get the run game going. He only had 15 carries in this game for 44 yards, and it has really been a staple of when they lean on Josh Jacobs, that's when they have a ton of success. This is what Josh McDaniels said after the game. In a nutshell, we put one group out there, and then they would put another group out there, and they'd have one more big guy than what we had. I don't want to get too much into the specifics of it, but there were times when we went out there with three defensive backs and four fronts against our personnel grouping, and it made it very difficult just to keep slamming runs in there because you were either going to ask Mac Hollins to block a linebacker, which is not good football in that regard. Part of their plan, they did a decent job trying to discourage that as much as they did today. We felt like we made some adjustments that helped us as the game went on, but we didn't have the ball as much in the second half, and that is our fault as well. Going back to the Josh Jacobs quote, I don't know if Josh McDaniels is going to get fired. We've read that the Raiders might be short on cash, so they might not have the funds to fire Josh McDaniels. But the Derek Carr emotional press conference a couple weeks ago, and I'm not hating on the emotional press conference, football and caring about what you do and your job and your livelihood and something like this, like that, like it's okay to show emotions. I'm not like picking on the emotions there, but the emotional press conference from Derek Carr a couple of weeks ago, coupled with now this kind of an reaction from Josh Jacobs, it feels like this locker room is either getting lost on the coaching staff or is already lost. I don't know if this core group of players that currently is in Las Vegas is going to believe in this coaching staff the way that they need to. Winning cures everything. And if they come out next year and they start the year, 3-0, 4-0, all of a sudden it could be, you could let bygones be bygones. But I don't know, man. It feels like the current coaching regime is slipping with the guys that are in the locker room now. And I felt like that quote was a big takeaway for me.
It was massive. Massive. It was what stood out to me that one, that tells me, and I know money changes everything, Josh Jacobs is leaving. Why would he, that level of frustration? Going to free agency? Why would he stay? Unless they tag him. Unless they tag him and he has no choice, which could very well happen. But not a good sign for your locker room. So, Trevor, what matters most to me is the Raiders are in this middle ground, right? Where they have a coach that they probably don't really believe in, but they're not going to fire him because of all the money reasons we've gone over on this podcast for a very long time. You brought in Devontae Adams on a huge trade because you thought that would get your offense over the hump with Derek Carr, and no problem with that trade. But things have not worked out for this team. I don't know if Derek Carr is going to be there next year. I lean on the side of no.
No.
I don't know if Josh Jacobs will be back next year. If they franchise tag him, I don't know if he'll want to be back. I mean, you run the guy into the ground on a one-year deal for a team that can't get out of its own way. I don't think he wants that.
Mm-hmm.
And, Josh Jacobs' words matter a lot. This is a guy that won a national championship in 2017, was the MVP of the SEC championship in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't a dude that doesn't know what winning looks like, okay? At a high level.
Right.
So when a guy like that speaks up, knowing what we know about Josh McDaniels' past, of what players have said about his tenure in Denver, it's bleak. The future of the Raiders right now is bleak, and that's a shame to say.
Yep.
Honestly.
Yep. I agree. We talked about Josh McDaniels maybe need to get fired. Let's skip one game and let's go to the Denver Broncos. 4-11 is what they dropped to after being whooped by the Los Angeles Rams, 51-14. And 4-11 is going to be the final head coaching record for Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, because he has since, earlier this week, been relieved of his duties. 1 year into coaching this Broncos team, Connor, it was an ugly, ugly game. And we've seen a lot of ugly games from the Denver Broncos. It's a tough offseason for them. They're going to be searching for another head coach. They were just going through a head coaching search 1 year prior. They clearly made the wrong choice. They've got a first-round pick because they traded Bradley Chubb, so they have Miami's first-round pick, but right now that's in the mid-20s. They don't have their current first-round pick, which is a top-5 pick because of the Russell Wilson trade. And to bring up the Russell Wilson trade, that's 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, and a 5-year, $245 million extension to a quarterback that looks so bad that he would actually deter good head coaching candidates from maybe wanting to come to Denver. Connor, what matters most, I guess, not just from this game, but also from the moves that they made firing Nathaniel Hackett earlier this week?
Denver is going to be one hell of a mess to clean up. And this trickles down across the board of, did you see the video of the sideline with Brett Rippon and Dalton Reisner?
I did.
Because I know the cameras caught it too late, but there is a video on Twitter of the actual interaction. And Latavius Murray, pro's pro, comes in and tries to have cooler heads prevail. By the way, side note, I forgot how massive Latavius Murray is. He's standing next to offensive linemen trying to calm people down. He looks like one. He's 6'3", 230.
Dude, so somebody actually, this is so funny. Somebody actually said to me this past weekend, it was my fiance's brother. We were just chatting about it as we were watching the game. He's like, yeah, Latavius Murray, he's 6'2", 230 pounds. And I'm like, Latavius Murray's not 230 pounds. No way. And he looked it up and sure as hell he is. He
looked like an offensive lineman next to them, but like jacked, like in shape. That's my biggest side takeaway here. I can't believe it that he's 230.
Hey, he could almost co-host his podcast. He's almost 6'5", 240.
He's getting close. Think about it, Latavius. You hit one winter bulking season and you are on the pod.
And you're on the pod. We'll have you on the pod.
In all seriousness, this is what I come away with, Trevor. And I have a mini Rams one, but that doesn't fully matter right now. I don't know how you sell this job to someone. Did you see the owner of the Broncos this week come out and say they will be reporting to them? Let me tell you, as somebody who's seen this structure with the New York Jets for a very long time, it's a disaster, okay? Let me just make that very clear. The head coach reporting to the owner that is not immersed in football operations the way they should be.
Right.
They're just a rich person is an issue. But I don't know who. Okay, what matters most is I don't know why somebody would want this job. Attach yourself to your future success to Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and
because there's no there's no getting rid of him,
and not just Russell Wilson, right? Like again, the it's like we talked about with the Titans. All of a sudden, the hierarchy, the pyramid, or like however you want to call the structure of an NFL team, is really messed up. Because as much as associating yourself with Russell Wilson could be bad, like if you're a head coach, you basically have to have a closed door meeting and say, okay, well, what are we doing with Russ? Because you're not tying me to Russ. Like, it's just like, it's not going to happen. Like, I will try to fix him, obviously, but can we get out of this contract? Is there a way to get out of this contract? And I'm not coming here if you're going to tie me to Russell Wilson. The other problem of this is George Paton, George Paton made the Russell Wilson trade, signed Nathaniel Hackett as head coach, signed Russell Wilson to a 5-year extension before he played it down with the Broncos.
Every bad move.
He's also somebody who, if you were a head coach, not only would you be sketched out about being tied to Russell Wilson, but you'd be sketched out to be tied to George Paton right now. It's not that Paton can't turn it around, but that all of a sudden gets really dangerous as a head coach. Like if things start going downhill and the owner of the Broncos looks at George Paton and goes, all right, well, you've been here for a couple of years. You've had plenty of time to kind of screw up your job here. You're gone. Are they just going to clean house? Is the next GM that they bring in going to be like, okay, well, then that's not my head coach that I hired, so I want to get out of that too. This Broncos situation is a mess, man. It's brutal. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
It's a dirty diaper, man.
You
can't just throw it in the trash.
You got to double bag that bad boy. You got to get it out of there. It's got to be in the dumpster quick. No, we'll dive, I think, very deep into the Broncos and their situation and what we think we could do to fix it. But that's tough, man. I wanted to kind of talk about that news a little bit, but this situation is terrible because of the timing of it all, the money involved with all of it, and how these decisions were made to get to this point. They are behind the 8 ball financially. They are behind the 8 ball with the most important position in the game. They are behind the 8 ball with the timing with their GM now, and they're behind the 8 ball with draft picks. Everything. I don't know if I just said that twice, but if I did, the draft picks part, it's worth mentioning because this team's 4-11 and they don't have a first round pick this year or next year. Anyways.
And their defensive coordinator,
Ejiro
Evero, yep, passed up the interim job.
Was he offered it?
Yes. He was like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, I'm good.
Adios.
Yikes.
While I was looking his name up for this pod, do you know the Rams and the Broncos separately list his pronunciations differently? Isn't that a doozy?
Oh, what is it? Am I saying it right? I thought I was saying it right.
No, the Broncos have it, Ejiro Evero.
Yeah.
The Rams have it, Ejiro Evero.
Oh. Interesting.
Maybe he did that to keep everybody on their toes.
Oh.
Either way, he's going to be a head coaching candidate, and he might not have to settle for the Broncos job.
I think that's an awful sign. All right, well, let's hit these 3 games real quick. Packers, Dolphins. Packers win this one in a cold day in Miami, Florida. It doesn't happen too often, but Packers felt like they were at home, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Well, so I should say, especially on the defensive side of the ball with all those takeaways to end the game in the fourth quarter. 26-20 was the final in this one. Packers playoff hopes stay alive. They have a 30% chance to make the playoffs. I think that's very funny. What was your big takeaway from this one? What mattered most, Connor?
That the Dolphins have a serious question to figure out at quarterback, and that is, this is a team that they built to win now, right? Mm-hmm. They traded their first round pick for Bradley Chubb. They gave him all that money. They signed Teron Armstead. They made all these moves to win now and to be sustainable. I'm not saying it was a Super Bowl or bust year for the Miami Dolphins. That's not what I'm saying. Things are getting scary quick for Miami. Tua is dealing with his 3rd concussion. It sounds doubtful for him to play against New England. Now, it's not a game in a sense that the Dolphins would like to have it. Oh, yeah, the Dolphins kind of need this game.
Yeah, the Dolphins kind of need this game.
Dolphins kind of need this game. I was saying
Dolphins have a 60% chance to make the playoffs. Like, it's not this guarantee that the Dolphins are
not even
make
close. And if the Jets beat the Seahawks, the Jets and Dolphins could be playing each other the last game of the season. Winner go home for both of them.
Winner gets
playoffs on the line. Yeah. Like, let's assume New England, which is dangerous, but New England loses one of those games to the Dolphins or Bills.
Mm-hmm.
The Jets-Dolphins most likely is win and get in.
Damn, I'd love to see it, though.
We all would love to see it.
I'd love to see it. I love as many win and you're in games as possible in Week 18.
It's the good stuff.
It is true. It is truly the good stuff. I agree with you. What matters most for this Miami team is a little bit of what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, but it's just it's even wider now. The variance of the Miami Dolphins is very high and low, it feels like. The ceiling of this team has not changed. This is a team that could put up a ton of points any given week. It's still a very potent offense. It's a team that could score a lot. But as we saw this past week, back was against the wall. It was time to do or die. And Tua threw not one, not two, but 3 interceptions in their final 3 drives of this game to end this game and give the Packers the win. Even aside from the concussion thing, which, look, 3 concussions in one season. I mean, maybe you should chuck Tua down for the year. I don't know what's going to happen there, but even if they don't, man, the Dolphins and where they are with Tua Tagovailoa are at a tough spot because Tua feels very robotic to me right now. It feels like it was kind of hard to quantify at the beginning of the year how when you watched the Dolphins, it looked like Tua was rattled under pressure. But then you go and you looked at his numbers, his grades, even some adjusted completion percentage versus pressure, and it was good. Like for the first half of the year, Tua was the highest graded quarterback under pressure in the NFL. And I think that to me, that picture is becoming very clear that was more on Mike McDaniel than it was on Tua, because it was Mike McDaniel saying, okay, here's the play. And if you are pressured, this is where it goes. This is your safety valve. And he just understood that really, really well. So pressures would still be registered on him. He would still have to get rid of the ball, but he was getting rid of the ball on a script still. And not all quarterbacks have that luxury. Not all of them have that ability to be able to do that. And Tua was able to do that. Now I think you're watching defenses adjust against Tua, and some of those safety valves are being taken away too. So he's still throwing to these timing throws that you just go, how are you letting that ball go? What are you looking at? And it's because he's just throwing with timing. He's doing what the script is telling him to do. He's not going off script with it, because when he goes off script, that's when you see Tua struggle. So they are, the Dolphins, clearly at this point, the variance of good Dolphins, bad Dolphins. That gap is a lot wider than I thought that it was even a couple of weeks ago, even if they make the playoffs. It's not that they can't score a lot of points. They can. But you could also get the ugly Miami Dolphins in a lot more of an ugly fashion than I thought we had a couple of weeks ago. So that's what matters most there.
I'm with you all the way. For Green Bay, their season stays alive. If Green Bay finds a way in, Green Bay will always scare people because it's Aaron Rodgers as a 7 seed.
Yeah.
It's like, nobody really cared about us for the last 2 months. And here we are.
Good reason.
And Aaron Rodgers loves the moment. So we'll keep an eye on Green Bay and where their season goes down the stretch here. All right, Trevor, sorry, we got to do it because this was the final game of Sunday.
Yep.
Well, they won.
Yep.
The Bucs beat the Cardinals in overtime, 19-16. The Trace McSorley-led Cardinals go down swinging. What do you got for us here, bud?
Final score of this one, 19-16. Tampa Bay Buccaneers win in overtime. Had to be comeback fashion, as Tom Brady often does. I mean, we're in the fourth quarter, and this game goes to 16-6. It looked like that double-digit lead was insurmountable, and then Tom Brady just goes all Tom Brady on them. These are 2 bad football teams. Look, I think that Tampa's probably going to still make the playoffs. I think they're still probably going to win the NFC South, although their battle against the Carolina Panthers this upcoming weekend Panthers win it, I'm going to say that the Panthers are going to win the South because then they would go into first place because they own the tiebreaker over the Bucs and there's one game remaining. These are two terrible football teams. The Arizona Cardinals have to clean house. Cliff Kingsbury's got to be gone. Steve Keim's got to be gone. You got to change that whole regime. Everything's got to be out. It's been trending in an ugly direction, and it's rearing its ugly head now. J.J. Watt just announced that he is retiring. Want to salute him. Make sure that we give our props to him. Truly one of the best players over the last 2 decades since the turn of the century. Just unbelievable player. Still playing at a high level, too. I want to make sure that that's mentioned.
Yeah, he had a good year.
They are. This is an absolute loss for the Arizona Cardinals, which we'll talk about on the Wednesday edition of the show when we get to the draft, because they're picking number 4 overall right now. And on the other side of things, man, nothing Tampa is doing is sustainable in offense. Nothing. Tempo and 2-minute drills are the only thing that work at the end of the first half and the end of the second half. It is a terrible football team. It's not a cohesive football team. The run game's bad. The pass game's bad. The offensive line's bad. The play calling's bad. Stinks. And the defensive line's all over. And the defense as a whole is just all over the place. It's not a good football team. These were 2 coaching staffs that are 2 of the, I would say, bottom 5 coaching staffs in the NFL right now. And that's what this game was. And that's what matters most, is that both these teams, whoever won, whoever lost, it didn't matter. You got to take a long, hard look in the mirror about what's about to happen this offseason.
I mean, that's it. Honestly, there's really not much more to say from this game. Arizona's in a full-blown rebuild. We'll talk to the Bucs about the Bucs more when their season officially ends, but right now it feels like the Bucs are going to be in the playoffs, and we'll see where it goes for Tom Brady from there. I agree with my big Bucs take was just going to be their line is just falling off a cliff, and it kind of trickles down to everything.
It's bad.
Last game, what a thriller. The Chargers and the Colts. The Colts actually trotted out Nick Foles in the year 2023. The results were as expected. He was sacked 7 times. He threw 3 interceptions.
3 picks.
He didn't get to 150 yards passing. His QBR was 3.4.
No way.
Oh, yeah. His quarterback rating was 31.9.
Oh, damn. They got Nick.
Yeah.
Father Time got Nick.
Yeah, Father Time finally got Nick. Chargers defense getting healthy.
Yeah.
That's a big story here. Derwin James, I know he got ejected, but Derwin James back on the field is what more needs to be said. I know I've been nitpicky with the Chargers. Am I wrong that I still think this offense should be so much better?
Oh, no, it should be. I think it should be.
They're in the playoffs. I didn't think they would be. So I said maybe 2 months ago or something that I just with their run defense and the coaching of their offense, I didn't see them as a playoff team. They made it. Credit to the Chargers. Staley probably keeps his job because of this.
Yeah, come on. Yeah.
I mean, I thought they would be Sean Payton destination number 1 personally.
I mean, Sean would have loved that. Payton would have absolutely loved that.
But they got it together. They got healthy, and they took care of business against one of the most lifeless teams left in the entire NFL right now, which is why I think the Texans beat this team at the end of the year. They're starting Nick Foles.
I know what they're doing.
Voluntarily.
I know.
They have other quarterbacks on the team.
I don't know about voluntarily.
They have other choices.
Yeah, violence. There's another choice.
They chose violence.
Look, this is a Chargers team that was 5-5 after week 11. They were 6-6 after week 13. I think a lot of people we were questioning whether Staley was going to make it to next offseason. I felt like he was. You're talking about, but if you're in talks with Sean Payton, if Sean Payton wants to come on down, maybe you make the switch. They're sitting here 9-6 now. They're on a 3-game winning streak. It feels like the team's playing better. Defense, like you said, is getting healthy. Offense in a little bit more of a groove. And I think that we're getting close to the best version of the Chargers. Sorry.
That was good.
We are getting to the best version of the Chargers that we were going to get this year. Close to it, I will say. Close to it. Minus like a peak Joey Bosa, of course. But, and obviously J.C. Jackson, a lot of things went differently.
There's a lot going on there.
But all that to say, I feel like with what has happened, we're getting the best version of the Chargers, and that's all you can ask going into the postseason. So hats off to Brandon Staley. I think he did a great job keeping this team together. They're certainly rolling as we get into the postseason. So I, without a doubt, think that his job is completely safe this season. Maybe they still make some changes in the coaching staff. I don't know if Joe Lombardi is going to stick around, but it probably depends on how they do with these last 2 regular season games and then going into the playoffs. But hats off to Staley. I thought he did a great job kind of righting the ship and just navigating some tough waters that the Chargers always seem to have, whether it's injury related or what would be it. So big shout out to the Chargers there. That's it for this one. That's it for this podcast. This is a monster pod, man. We got
one last thing I want to drop in there.
Yeah. What do we got?
I won't go as far as Frank Reich redemption tour because he got fired by the Chargers as their OC.
Mm-hmm.
But in all seriousness, because I know it's been the week to get jokes off on him, I would actually really like to see Nathaniel Hackett on that Chargers staff next year.
Ooh.
Justin Herbert.
Okay.
A dead serious take. And if you guys only remember Hackett as this tenure with the Broncos, which was about as embarrassing as it gets for a head coach, obviously somebody there, and Rodgers highly valued. I think that would be a really nice soft landing for Hackett with a quarterback that could honestly use him in his ear right now.
Could see it. Connor's calling a shot. Maybe it's good for him. Maybe it's good for him. Maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe it's good for all parties involved. Because I do think that Nathaniel Hackett is not done in the NFL. No way at all. But being a head coach is a different beast. So let him be an offense coordinator again. Maybe with
you don't have to fire Lombardi that way, because right, like if Staley wants to stick by Lombardi, it's like, okay, we'll bring in some help for you.
Sure.
Just a thought.
Just have a war in the offense.
But you're right, Trevor. Some guys are great assistants and just cannot handle that.
It's a different beast. It's just it's a totally different beast. There are a lot of teams that we didn't necessarily touch on in this episode, but if you've listened to this podcast, you know that if we didn't touch on your team in the What Matters Most, it means that we're probably going to touch on them for the Wednesday pod when we update the 2023 NFL draft order. That's what's coming up next, and it's going to come up tomorrow. Appreciate you guys being flexible with us as we took a day off for the holiday. We gave you this one on Tuesday, and we're giving you another one right back on schedule with the Wednesday podcast. We'll tell you what matters most. We'll get into the Houston Texans being number 1 overall, and maybe for now, maybe not for long. Who knows? We'll see. And then, of course, we will update the rest of the order as well, give you some team needs, some scenarios, all the good stuff that you have come to know and love with the Wednesday podcast. Connor, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, that sums it up. We'll be back, obviously, with everything draft related, like you said. So if you're a Steelers fan or whoever fan you are that we didn't talk about you a lot today, you always get a little love on the midweek show.
A lot of love. We got a lot of love to give around because that's the bread and butter of this podcast, getting to the 2023 NFL draft. We'll see you guys on Wednesday. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Connor Rogers. Thank you so much for listening to the NFL Stock Exchange. See you next week.